I wanted to circle back just a little bit and talk about the evolution of product launch formula just a little bit, because I think this is really important. It's got some very important lessons for you. So you might have heard my story. I was actually, when I started my business, my online business, I was actually Mr. Mom. I was home taking care of a little baby. My son, he's 1 year old. And then a few years later, I had a daughter. We had 2 kids. And then I was taking care of a real baby. And, my wife's off working. And I had completely committed career suicide. I'd been in the corporate world. And you've heard about the story about square pegs and round holes. And that was me. I did not fit very well in the corporate world. I just couldn't figure it out. It wasn't like I couldn't play the politics. I didn't even know the politics were going on. I'm serious. I'm really serious about that. I was a failure. I almost got fired, from a real corporate, where I was actually a manager. I came this close to getting fired. I quit just in time. Dead serious. And that's how I became the Mr. Mom. I quit. I said, I can't handle this. I quit. My wife was just getting out of school. She started a job, and that went on for a while. And then my wife, bless her heart, she came home, and she finally said to me, I can't stand this. I want to be home with the babies. And it was hard for me to argue with that, but I had nowhere to go. I had completely committed. This is back in the 90s, and if you're in a corporate world, that putting, I've been Mr. Mom for the last 4 years on the resume doesn't work too good. And so I said, well, what can I do? And back then I didn't know about being an entrepreneur, about having a business. So I thought, I'll go back to school. So I decided to go back to graduate school because I had my undergraduate degree. So I was going to go back to grad school. And that was, when you're going to get into grad school, especially for business, it's the same thing. You need a resume. I had no resume. So I said, okay, what could I possibly put on that resume? And right then, I'd been spending a lot of time online. I was actually studying the stock market, and I'd spent a lot of time online studying the market. And I said, okay, maybe I've seen other people publishing stuff via email. Maybe if I start publishing a newsletter, and I could put that on my resume. They won't know it's an email newsletter. It'll look just as good. And if I can just I had this number in my head of 600 people. If I could get 600 people to subscribe to my newsletter and I put that on a resume, it would look really good. And that's exactly what I did. I started publishing before I even had a website. I just started sending out emails to my father-in-law and my wife and my second email address. I'm serious. I actually counted. I had 19 subscribers, and one of them was my second email address. How pathetic is that? So anyways, that started to grow. And I got to that 600 subscribers. And I went through this whole process of getting to grad school, which involves this whole process of taking a test and studying for months for the GMAT, they call it. Passed the test, got accepted into grad school. And that was going to be in January. This was actually January 97 when it was going to start. But in December 96, I got this idea. Well, by then I actually had thousands of people on my subscribing. And I thought maybe I'll sell them something. See if there's, and I'd never sold anything before, but I went and bought a book on, I forget what it was on. It talked about selling something or other. So I put together what turned out to be a little launch. And on January 1st, we because I had a partner that was helping me with content, we launched that. We rolled it out. I actually did a little pre-launch. I didn't know what it was at that time. I did a pre-launch in December and did that launch. And we got $1,400 in orders. And that was we were actually selling a trading service, so that was only about 5 or 6 orders. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was about 5 or 6 orders. And a few days later, I go into grad school, and I'm sitting there in the first. And this story I have told before, so you might have heard this. But I was sitting, in the classroom, in the first class, and I'm not like a 23-year-old kid, so I can only put up with so much of the schooling stuff. And the teacher's sitting there, and I was thinking about that $1,400. And I was looking at this class and thinking about a year and a half of school and then going and getting a job, working for some brokerage house or something. And I'm looking at the teacher and I'm thinking about $1,400. I'm looking at the teacher and right in the middle of that class, I just stood up and I just walked out. Never went back. And I mean, I'd spent the last 6 months getting there, starting that newsletter, studying for that exam, taking the exam, going through their whole stupid, I just walked out, and that was the end of it. And then it was launch after launch. Because, my thought process was, if I do this once, I can do it again, I can do it again, I can do it again. And that was one time where I actually had some real clarity. Fast forward, business starts to go well. It builds. The first year we do 10,000. The second year we do 80,000. The third year I think we're 200,000, something like that, approximately. And then, so I started to meet some of the people that were also selling online, some of the other marketers. I went to a seminar. It was actually the very first, first I went to a Jonathan Meisel seminar. I met someone who became a really good friend of mine, Don Crowther. And then a couple of years later, I went to the very first big seminar. And at that very first big seminar, this is in 2003, I shared on the shuttle ride over, I shared a ride with this guy turned out to be Frank Kern. No one had heard of Jeff Walker, no one had heard of Frank Kern at that point. Then at that seminar, I met a guy named John Reese, just at the back of the room, and we were just goofing around, having a beer, I think, whatever. Frank and John, and I met a lot of other folks. You might have heard of Jeff Johnson, Jeff Mulligan, Jason Potash. No one had ever heard of any of us. None of us were on stage at all. All these other guys were on stage, people you've never heard of, people you have completely been forgotten. The people on the stage never did any product launches. The people out in the audience, I ended up sharing some of the stuff with, and we started to do product launches. I'm sure some of you have heard or seen some of the goings-ons in the internet marketing world of the products we sell, right? Because you're on my list. You're on everyone else's lists. I know it. You get all of it. And so that's how we all met. And we became friends. And this is years before anyone had heard of any of us. So in any case, I happened to mention to Frank, and Frank was doing really, really well, but I just remember he's sitting, leaning up against this wall with this Corona, and he's got real short hair, and it's not blonde. He's he's the Georgia boy, okay? But he's sitting there still looking just cool as hell, just like that Corona, and somehow I'd mentioned to Johnson about that 6 figures in 7 days, and he said to Frank, he's like, Walker here, he did six figures in 7 days, and Frank's like, oh, that's pretty cool. It's like, I've done pretty good before, but I've never done 6 figures in 7 days before. And so I sort of helped John and then eventually helped Frank a little bit with some of this launch stuff. And it goes nuts. They do $1 million launches, okay? I'd never done $1 million launches at that point. I thought $106,000 in 7 days was really good. Fast forward, we meet Yannick, and people actually had heard of Yannick, but Yannick was doing this new thing he called this underground seminar, which you might have heard of. It's gotten to be a big deal. He invited me to come and speak at that one, and I went to speak. He said, come and talk about this. I don't even know if we called it product launches back then. I can't even remember. But he said, come and talk about this product launch stuff. And I'm like, okay. So I went and talked about the product launch stuff. And it turned out that original business, about 3 weeks before I was going to go speak at the Underground, that business imploded. I can't, because of legal agreements, I can't give too many details, but that business one Friday afternoon ceased to be. Before I got the phone call, it existed. After I got the phone call, it didn't exist. This wasn't any regulatory issues. It wasn't FTC. It wasn't SEC. It wasn't CFTC. It wasn't FDA. It wasn't DEA. It wasn't any of those. And Don actually went through this, counseled me through this, and knows the whole story. But that business ceased to be. It was about 3 weeks before I was going to go talk about product launches at Yannick's Underground. So I'm like, well, maybe a door's opening for me here. So I decided when I went to his thing, I would sell a program to teach about it. And so I went there, and I sold this. I gave a talk, and gave everything about product launches that I could do in like an hour and a half. And at the end of it, I said, I'm going to teach a program on this. It's going to be a series of teleseminars. And if you want to buy it, it's going to be, I think it was $2,000. It's going to be $2,000, and go to the back room and buy it. I'm sure you've seen other people pitch stuff before. But then before I was going on, I was thinking, okay, by this time I knew a few things about marketing. And I'm like, this contrast principle. In Cialdini, right? It's like, if I'm going to sell something for $2,000, this guy that no one's ever heard of me before, I'm going to walk up on the stage, I'm going to try to impress him to give me $2,000. That's a lot of money. How am I going to do that? Well, maybe if I have a really big ticket item, it'll make that $2,000 look good. So I'm like, what could be that big ticket item? What could it be? Any guesses what it could be? Consulting. So I'm like, I know what I'll do. I'm going to, I'll offer $10,000 and I'll work with you one-on-one for $10,000. And, and that's going to make $2,000 look really, really cheap. Like, I was pretty proud of myself for that idea. And then I'm like, I got the brainstorm, taking the shower. Oh, I know. I'll tell them they got to give me 10% of the money, too, for the lunch. That's going to really look good. It's going to sound professional and stuff like that. So then, like a day or two before I'm going to fly out there, and of course I thought, there's only one reason for this, right? It's to make the $2,000 look good. And then a couple days before I'm going to fly out there, I talked to Don Crowther. And I'm like, Don, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go out there, I'm going to try to sell this teleseminar thing, see if anyone buys it. But I figure to make it look good, I got to have a high price item. So I'm going to do this $10,000 plus 10% coaching thing. And Don's like, I'll just make it $15,000. And I'm like, okay. It's like, no one's going to buy this, right? And so, when you go to sell these services, one of the toughest things is, can you keep a straight face when you quote your price? Right? This is a key secret, is can you keep a straight face? And so, the beauty of this was, I thought there is no way in hell, no possible way anyone's going to pay me $15,000. $10,000, $15,000. Don could have said charge $50,000. It wouldn't have made any difference. I would have said, okay, no problem. Because internally, I'm like, no one's going to buy that, so I don't even have to be serious. I don't have this thing in me, I can't charge that much. I was just throwing a fictitious number, It's like, whatever. Yeah, it's going to be $3 million to hire me. Or you could buy for $2,000, you can buy the teleseminar. So I get up there and I give my talk and I knocked it out of the park. I mean, that talk actually became part of Product Launch Formula. It was so good, I think. And I get to the end and I'm like, okay, well, I know some of you probably got questions. I've never been a pitch man. I certainly wasn't a pitch man back then. But it was basically, hey, if you want more, there's two ways. One, you can do this thing where you pay me $15,000, 15%, 10% of your profits. And the other thing is you can, buy this teleseminar series for $2,000. Oh, by the way, for the people that want to work with me one-on-one, there's only 2 of those available. Of course, come on, I know scarcity, right? I mean, by then I've been using all this stuff. By then I'd studied. So I wasn't a pitch man on the stage, but I was a marketer, okay? And I get off the stage, and I thought I was going to have, 20 or 30 people wanting to buy that $2,000 thing. Well, I got about 6 or 7 or 8. That's how many people took the original Product Launch Formula, I forget what I called it, teleseminar series or something. But I had a boatload of people wanting to do the one-on-one thing. I had all kinds of people. In fact, I'll tell you, one of them was, actually, Dan Kennedy was out in the audience there. Dan Kennedy's teaches marketing, and he's someone I've studied quite a bit. And I think he's got great material. And I saw him out in the audience, and so I got the little competitive thing going. I'm like, I'm going to sell Dan Kennedy. I've spent enough money with that dude. It's time for him to give me $2,000. So I walked up on the stage with the intention of selling Dan Kennedy. Didn't work. He didn't buy. Another guy was in the audience. His name was Corey Rudel. Okay, so Corey, before all the gurus, and before the gurus, there was Corey Rudel. I think he was literally the first person that taught internet marketing. And he was wonderful at it. He had I saw him speak a couple times. He had a great stage presence. Unfortunately, Corey Rudel's passed away. He had a horrific car accident. But Corey Rudel was out in the audience. Corey Rudel came up to me and said, I want you to run a launch for me. I want to pay you that $15,000 and 10%. So that was a really, like, that's sort of like God coming down and saying, hey, dude, can you do a launch for me? So I mean, I was like, holy cow, I'm onto something. I mean, and in the end, those two, I ended up only taking two, and those two people generated a heck of a lot more money than all the people who bought the $2,000 deal. So, and just to recap that, unfortunately, Corey had his accident before we actually worked together. In fact, it was very shortly after we sealed the deal. But that thing, that offer, that just flipped my head. It was like, oh my God, look at this demand. So what did I do with that? I did absolutely nothing. I didn't teach this. I didn't teach how to consult. And I have taken clients, but it's always been a very small number of clients. So that's sort of like the evolution of the idea of doing launches for people. Now, I think we've got, like, one of the things I had to throw this in here, and forgive me, because I know you guys are all on board and 100% believe in this stuff, but there's always in the back of your head, this stuff doesn't work for such and such a market. This doesn't work for such and such a market. This doesn't work for this type of person. This doesn't work for this type of person. So I'm just going to flash up on the screen here. Some of you have seen these, but these are some of just the case studies, the public case studies. This is Randy Pryor about knitting. This is Greg about the stock market. And this is Ray Edwards is here. Ray launched all kinds of stuff. This one he was talking about copywriting. Jason was selling poker training. Chet Womack, I can't talk about his niche, but it was a little hobby niche. Okay, next, let's see who we got. Martin Howie. Martin Howie's launched all kinds of stuff, mostly about consulting. Leslie, how to write love letters. That's Orion, how to use Photoshop. Joe Mercola, how to not need LASIK, correct your vision without LASIK. There's myself and Ed Dale. Ed Dale's talking about rolling out a stock launch, like a equity launch in Australia. Chuck, he was quilting as well. So there's like quilting and there's quilting and knitting, I think, are those two guys. Kyle, these guys, fat burning launch, sort of a health and exercise membership site. Todd, he's launched all kinds of stuff, massage therapy, every other kind of crazy thing, how to build your massage therapy business. Valerie's teaching people how to quit their jobs. Will's teaching people how to play guitar, like really good guitar, not like lousy guitar like I play. Jose, teaching people about stocks, I think in South America, I think it's Guatemala, but I'm not positive about Guatemala, but teaching people about stock market investing. Honduras. Okay. So those are just a few of them. I mean, I've published dozens of these things, and this stuff works in all kinds of markets. Now, I didn't have to sell you guys on that, but I thought I'd better do it anyways, because it's easy for every one of us to look at. Sometimes I even do it, where I'll look at something and initially I'll say, I don't see it. I'm not feeling the love. But then after you think about it, this works in all kinds of markets, all kinds of products. Now, I've primarily talked about here and in a lot of my marketing about selling information products. This also works with physical products. It works with services. It works with online services, offline services. It works really well with information products and online services. And that's what most of my clients and most of my case studies have been about. But you can take it offline. We had the guy do the band accessories launch, where he's working for a wholesaler selling to retailers of marching band accessories, gloves and batons and stuff like that. So this will work in all, offline as well.